The views and opinions presented in today's episode are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force. Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson, and thank you for joining us for Episode 2 of the Readiness series on the Firedog Podcast. The Readiness series will focus on all aspects of Air Force firefighter wartime preparedness. Throughout the series, we will explore the origin and details of the Fire and Emergency Services concept of employment, techniques, tactics, and procedures, examine equipment packages, and much more. If you have any ideas for topics you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at thefiredogpodcast@gmail.com. That is the Fire DAWG podcast. While the series emphasizes topics related to wartime readiness, rest assured that all information shared is unclassified, publicly available, and free of sensitive content. In today's episode, I'm excited to be joined by Chief Master Sergeant Retired Phillip Winkelmann, Chief Master Sergeant Mark Abrahamson, and Senior Master Sergeant Jesse Marshall. Chief Winkelmann, of course, is our former Air Force Fire and Emergency Services Career Field Manager. Along with Chief Abrahamson and Senior Marshall, they were instrumental in the early development of our Fire and Emergency Services concept of employment. In this episode, we discuss the development of this concept and share insights into how they arrived at the current methods of employing forces in a contingency environment. It is my pleasure to welcome Chief Winkelmann, Chief Abrahamson, and Senior Marshall. All right, gentlemen, welcome. So I'd like to start out by giving each of you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Tell us what you're up to now and what you did previously and how that's relevant to what we're going to talk about today, which is F&ES contingency concept of employment and kind of how it was born. Chief Wink, if you want to go first. Hopefully that's okay that I call you Chief. It's a hard habit to break.
That's a hard habit for everybody to break, including myself. Thanks, Matt. Chief Master Sergeant Retired Phil Winkelmann was the career field manager for the last 3.5, 4 years. Kind of walked in day one to the revitalization of Readiness up on the headquarters staff because of everything going on, and was fortunate enough to have the right people in the right places at the right time to really create something that was pretty cool. And then I'll turn it over to my cohorts in crime. You want to go ahead and go, Mark?
Yeah, Chief Master Sergeant Mark Abrahamson, about to be retired. Currently at AFFOGEN as the Expeditionary Requirements Development Manager for Fire and Emergency Services. Previously, and kind of what brought me into this role is being one of the senior enlisted in ACC after we lost ACC command staff. Just being in the command, and as this whole thing started to develop, being stationed at Moody, and with everything going on there, I was at the right time, at the right place to get involved in this whole process. So just a fortunate opportunity that levied on me based on where I was at and being a senior enlisted member within the career field.
Chief Abrahamson, we're going to talk about this a little later, but Moody was a lead wing, right? In the early stages?
That is correct. Yeah. We were one of 4 bases that started off as a lead wing when that whole thing was developing, and Moody kind of took the tip of the spear, if you will, with ACC on trying to determine how are we going to employ ACE. And so it afforded us a great opportunity because, and I think we'll get into this later, just being able to take all our concepts and then put them into action immediately and test them out. So we had a good time frame and a good opportunity to do that.
Jesse?
I'm Senior Master Sergeant Jesse Marshall. I am currently in Hawaii, stationed at Hickam. I'm Air Force IMSC Detachment 2 for PACAF, and previous to that, about 6 months ago, I was the Force Development Manager working directly for Chief Wink. And he's the one that roped me into the beginnings of AFFOGEN and ACE and the vision moving forward. And my role in it was, how are we going to prepare our firefighters for the next fight? And that's what I worked on for the last 2 years. Over.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate each one of you coming on here and taking the time to explain to us how all of this started. I think a lot of people are curious, to include myself. And so we'll just get right into it. Chief Winkelmann provided me with, a list of talking points. The first one was the beginning, quote unquote, go do. Now, so I'd like to kick off the conversation by talking about the beginning of the development. What did it look like from a career field manager perspective when you're told to transition the career field to this new scheme of maneuver, this new Air Force generation concept?
Yeah, so it all started pretty much in the Charlotte Fire Conference back in 2019. We went there and we had some pretty high level briefs in the fire panel, and we're sitting there. Chief Abrahamson was there, myself, and a few others. And you're starting to see the development of AFFOGEN. You're starting to hear from senior leaders on we need to move to this to revitalize readiness, and you're starting to hear the whispers about it in the highest levels. And then you hear briefings and you see that you can see the future. You can see what the concepts are going to look like. And then you can see from a fire perspective that we're all over the place. Like we have different schools of thought coming out of each and every command, whether it be ACC, USAFE, PACAF, Guard, Reserve. Everyone has a different idea of what this should look like and is employing it that way. And from a higher level perspective, you sit there and you're like, we can never get organized and get to what right looks like if we don't know what we do from the top down. And Chief Pittman and Chief Morris at the time both saw this as well. And after those briefings, we sat down and we talked about it, and they both said, listen, we need to get all of our stuff in the same sock. You need to move out and you need to fix this. Do what you need to do. This is going to be your number one task coming out, is because Chief Pittman, I mean, might be far and away the smartest person I know to date. And he saw it from the beginning and said, go do. I'll let the others chime in if they have anything else. I think Mark was there too.
Yeah, it was a good conversation because imagine everybody in a room and everyone's got different ideas on what their command is kind of trying to bring to the table on this, and nobody's kind of agreeing because everyone comes from a different perspective. So we're all kind of, hey, this is what ACC is doing, this is what USAFE is doing, PACAF is over here. So it was very confusing at that time, and it was a good start for Chief Pittman to say, all right, hey, I need everybody to come together and develop one plan that our community is going to do going forward. So it was that was pretty much the kickoff, the brainstorming session, if you will, that sparked everything going forward.
What were some of the disagreements on, or you said that PACAF is doing something different than ACC? Can you provide an example of what that
Yeah,
might be?
yeah. So everybody has kind of a different AOR, right? USAFE and PACAF, you're already in place. PACAF is a little different. They're all water based. So how are they gonna move forces and so on? Whereas USAFE is pretty much all land based. So their tactical and operational objectives were a little bit different. And then of course you look at ACC, and ACC is within the continental United States. So it's not about what we're doing at the specific place. It's about how we're going to go forward. So we're thinking of two AORs, and none of us were kind of on the same thing, right? And it's not just coming from the fire representation. It's the entire command and how we approach it. So at the time, it was a bit confusing to see. All right, how are we going to do force employment and all these different objectives and operational planning when we don't have a solid structure to begin with.
It sounds to me like logistics was obviously it's a big piece of everything, or moving and generating forces. Was that kind of the bulk of it? You talk about moving logistically among the sea, and then, or even like your supply chain is going to be better continental United States than it is in Pacific Air Forces. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah,
Logistics was
you
a
are,
big
you
piece of it.
are, you are you're pretty close on that one, but a lot of it was, to be quite frank, a lot of these commands keep not understanding the dynamic and the battleground we were going to, right? When you look at their plans and what they want to do, it now when you look back at it, it's like there's no way this would have worked. But at the time, they had it in their mind that we've done it this way for 20 years. We can keep doing it this way and we can still be the dominant force in the world and nobody's going to stop us. And it took a lot for people at the highest levels, whether it be combatant commanders or even firefighters, to realize that it was adapt or die. Change or die was basically the way it had to be moving forward.
Jesse, any perspective from your side of the house on that? Like the beginnings?
Nope. So Chief Wink and Chief Abrahamson have really been, the visionary leaders that we needed. and I didn't come on board until March of 22. So everything that happened before then, behind the scenes, it was really all of their brainchild that drove us to where we are today.
Gotcha. And we may get into this later, but I wrote it down to bring it up. And I remember Chief Wink, you talking about it maybe a couple of years ago. That was there Air Force specialties on the chopping block?
Yeah, it goes to the conversation. Yeah, it goes to the conversation as we move forward, for sure. I think from the beginning there was AFSCs on the chopping block. There was a lot of them because as they started to get light, lean, and lethal, they look at the relevancy of an AFSC or the relevancy of a unit when you employ forces, right? If it's not combat capable and it's not a complete part of a combat employment, why do I need it?
Right.
And you saw a lot of that in the beginnings of this as it started to roll out and Mark can attest to this when he was dealing league wing stuff. You get out on the airfield and you'd send the crew of lead wing people out there and they'd show up and you'd look around and it's like, why do I have a dentist? Like why is there a lawyer here? Why is this here? And you didn't it took a lot to get that together. So a part of this we go forward, and I always like to say this to our career field is that I mean, nobody values us in fire and emergency services until they need us. And there's going to be some themes of that as we move forward. And there were times as career field managers, we were sitting the table as they tried to decide, and we're going to talk about this in the future, MCA and some things like that. And there were many people that said, oh, we'll just MCA firefighting. And I was like, cool, you can do that. And then when I explained to them the totality of what fire and emergency services bring and what a force enabler we are as we move forward and how we do things and just it was quiet in that room. Nobody wanted to be MCA firefighting because they cannot do what we do every day.
I think our nature as firefighters in the civilian service or in the military is we are Swiss Army knife. We are, and you see it day to day. And I think when we started talking about this multi-capable piece of Air Force force generation, it was kind of brought to my attention. You always knew, when people call 911, they just want you to solve their problem, and so we are exposed to complex problem sets that aren't necessarily a structure fire or an emergency medical situation. Maybe my dog is stuck in a fence, right? And so I think I think that we marry perfectly with the idea of multi-capable. And like I said, I started focusing on it a bit when the idea started coming to fruition. And something as simple like I went to combat arms training just last week, and one of the instructors there who was, they have people walking back and forth as you're shooting, and he had made a comment that CE shoots better, civil engineers shoot better than security forces when they come and do their quals, and I just, anyways, I wanted to highlight that point that firefighters are perfect to employ in this kind of, in an agile combat employment scheme maneuver where you need less people to do things. They can do multiple things, I guess, and it's within their nature to do so. So, well, let's talk about you said the call for the first task. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so as we're starting to develop this, higher headquarters is sending out taskers, and they're saying, okay, we're going to get after this. Here's a tasker. Tell us how many people you need to stand up this new thing we're going to call AFFOGEN. And inside AFFOGEN, we're going to talk about having the RAB, the XAB, and the EAB. And nobody knows these are the first time anybody's heard these terms. Well, all of this came out, and of course, in classic headquarters Air Force fashion, they gave us like 48 hours to figure it out. Well, I am literally on the road traveling from my PCSing across, so I'm not even in DC yet. Chief Morris and Chief Pittman are dealing with AFFF, and they're actually out of pocket and can't even begin to deal with it. So lo and behold, I just call my right-hand man, and he just happened to be in front of a computer, and I was like, hey, Mark, I got this task for you, and I let him finish what I had to do.
Yeah, thanks. Good segue right into it, right? Nothing like a 4 o'clock on a Friday call and tasker going forward. But yeah, basically, so we had the leads of those putting together AFFOGEN, and they at first said, "Hey, we'll just take what the wartime planning standard was, and we'll use that for fire." But traditionally, we've always been too big to execute into this new AFFOGEN system. So they had us shrink down. So it took me a couple of days to determine, all right, what is ACC and half trying to get after? And then once we kind of understood what the goal was, we were able to take a look and slim down and say, what is it that we actually need? If we get rid of, levels of service from our brains and then start thinking critically on a lot of the requirements that we need for deployment, we can shrink down and we can define exactly how many people and how much equipment we need to build these teams. So it was about a week turnaround, of course. That was just the initial phases to get something down on paper. And then for the next 3 or 4 months, it was just a continuous refinement of what AFFOGEN looks like. And of course, it's a lot different then on what it looks like now. Everything is kind of transformed at least half a dozen times. So it was just refining that over and over again. And then it was, well, why do you need this amount of people and why do you need these amount of trucks? So that kind of pushed us into, all right, we need to get something solidified and then determine, what are the tasks that we are going to be doing and how can we justify the right number of people that goes forward on each of these teams within AFFOGEN. So,
yeah, talking a bit about the mission essential task. What are we going to do in a contingency environment? So I think what you explained is, write those down. What are we doing, and what do we need to be able to accomplish those? Were you stumped at any point? Gosh, we bring so much water and so many things. We're just so logistically heavy. Is this even possible?
Yeah, so that was our first meeting. So after this thing went down with Chief A, and he threw out the basic kind of foundation of it, we all got together in San Antonio. I think it was December of 19, and we started to put it on the board about, okay, what's this look like? What do we need to bring? How do we do this? And that was a very trying week because the individuals who were there, and bless their hearts, they were all there for the right reasons, but still you can't get out of that mindset that we've built ourselves into over the last 20 years of, if I'm going to go, I'm going to have 7,000 firefighters, 25,000 gallons of water, and a coffee stand, right? And if I don't have that, I'm not going. And that was a mindset of a lot of people, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's changing that dynamic and getting your brain out of your head and send it to the side and truly looking at the requirements. And when Mark had to give those numbers of people, we haven't even thought about mission essential tasks yet, like what our requirements were downrange. He just had 2% of the requirement and had to go off of that. Is that fair, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, going back to our December meeting, it was a challenge because right at that time we hadn't made the decision whether or not are we going to support MCA, are we going to those CL locations, and if so, if that's the way the community is moving forward, how many people is that, and can we do it with 2 or 3, or does the team need to be bigger, and kind of sorting out those things. But again, yeah, going to your point on logistics, yeah, absolutely. I think it takes, and Wink, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 C-17s in order to move a contingency of, P-19s, personnel, and all kinds of other equipment for a continuous team that we have in, say, AFCEN. And shrinking that down, the requirement became, well, only 2 C-17s are going to move all equipment going to a forward operating site. So how can you get a smaller footprint into that? Otherwise, we'll just keep you at the mob, and then we'll just take the risk. But we know that's not going to happen, right? Eventually, it's going to come back and say, fire, you need to get in here. So we had to think slimmer with regard to water, the trucks, and the personnel and equipment that we had to bring with us.
And to that point, we had to think slimmer with our side of a risk-informed decision from a fire and emergency services professional side, and not a risk-adverse decision from a flyer. We had to tell them what is right and not be told what they want. And that was a huge point going forward, because this isn't a want side, this is a requirement side. So everything was built to that point of, what does combat effective mean?
How often was the level of service brought up as how often was it a sticking point in moving forward? Well, hold on, we need X amount of gallons for a set 1, 2, 3, 4. At what point were we like, forget about standards or forget about NFPA standards, forget about all of our standards associated with manpower, water, and agent. Like, let's, like you said, take your brain out of your head, put it to the side, and how do we focus on just saving life? Like, when was the point brought in that we're less worried about the infrastructure, we're more worried about the people in a contingency environment?
Man, I'll tell you what, if I had $1 every time we had to talk about
I
that,
bet. That's why I brought it up.
but they're good conversations. Like,
Right.
especially that December meeting, they were good conversations that
Right.
helped shape where we needed to get. I mean,
Right.
every time you do something, you never want everybody on the same page. You need to have those staunch
Sure.
individuals that are going to come up and say, no, this is wrong because of this. And they're not doing it out of emotion. They're not doing it out of anything. They're doing it out of
They've been conditioned.
exactly.
that way.
And it's helpful to help build where we're
Sure.
at.
Well, that's just I guess a natural evolution of change. You're not going to get everybody to just change their mind overnight, right? It's a process. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I know that was a big, and even to this day, I think that it's brought up, although less often maybe as it was before. It's funny because my now commander, Lieutenant Colonel, great guy, motivated, on his second, maybe even first command. Anyways, he was briefing all of the changes, the future changes, the DCW, the ATF stuff, and then eventual DCW. He's briefing it to the unit, doing, what a good commander should do. And he looks over at us, he goes, and it was in a slide deck that he had been provided from somebody at HAF, and he's like, in fire, you're not going to have all the people that you would have in garrison home station for firefighting. You're not going to have all the people that you want. You're not going to have all the trucks you want. Like, he was trying to, give that point to us because he anticipated that it would be a contentious thing, right? And we went up to him later like, hey, we already know, like I don't want to tell him like, hey, we're 10 steps ahead of you here, but it's like, yeah, we've been talking about this for years. Well, for at least a handful of years, but it's kind of funny.
That's a great point, Matt. I mean, I don't think people out there really realize how tip of the spear we were as Fire and Marine Services for the Air Force on this. When we look back on this and we see where everybody's going, and Mark can bring up some great points as well, and so can Jesse. We truly, as engineers, led the way on this for the Air Force.
Yeah, I think it's that example and what your commander said. It's a good point. So some of the feedback we got internally to our own members and from outside, it's all or none, right? It's all right. We need to bring this based on NFPA requirements or whatever our AFI says, or we can't go. Well, why does it have to be that way? I mean, we can still provide some service and some safety to things that are required. Yeah, you're not going to have the same thing you're going to have at home station, but we're at a different risk than we are in a wartime environment than we are at home station. So you've got to be able to adapt and think a lot more critically on how to bring something rather than just say, hey, the policy says this, I can't go, period.
Let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of it if we can. I mean, you provided a talking point about the, so you get this call, you get this task, this go do kind of direction, like, hey, go figure this out. At what point did you put together a working group, and how did we start building what it looks like today?
Yeah, so we had that first one in December where we brought them together and kind of took the numbers that Mark had worked in it on his little whiteboard in his office and sent up to higher headquarters, and we started to figure out how we're gonna line them and how it was gonna work. We had a couple more working groups, and we really attacked this hard. But the big part of it was, we can write all this stuff up on a whiteboard and we can talk about it, but until we actually employ it, is any of this stuff really gonna work? So again, Mark was in the perfect position, being the fire chief at Moody at the time, along with some others, and we looked heavily on him and lead wing when they were first starting that lead wing concept, and had him go out and say, "Hey man, let's talk to your senior leaders, put this stuff into action." And before at a half level, I take this product and I push it through the wickets of hierarchy for approval and blessing through the Council of Colonels and the Generals and the A3 and everybody else. And I slap the table saying, this is our policy as Air Force Fire and Marine Services. Let's see if this actually works. And I'll turn it over to Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So we had that meeting in December, and of course, we didn't finalize everything that we wanted to get after, but it definitely laid a lot of groundwork because 4 months later, we had an exercise that Moody was doing called Mosaic Tiger, and we had the opportunity to test out any strategies that we wanted to go after. So we did all these exercises with a 20-person crew, a 10-person crew, a 7-person crew, and then we tried it around with 3 people, right? So mixing it around, like how effective are all these things that we're bringing up for AFFOGEN? What can we really do? And what do we want to agree on that our limits are? So we did all those, and it was a great lessons learned, and we just happened to be in the right opportunity to execute that during the exercise. We had a good lessons learned, especially when we were testing out the forward operating site. The wing kept saying, "Hey, we don't need firefighters, going forward or whatnot." And I was, slamming my hand down, saying, "Yes, you do." And the biggest thing that they kept coming up with was, "Well, if we have an in-flight emergency, we'll just send it back to the main operating base." And so I went down to Avon Park, where our forward operating site was. And sure enough, they had an in-flight emergency, and they're like, "Hey, we can't fly this thing back because it doesn't have enough fuel. We have to land it right here." And we had firefighters there. Well, when the aircraft landed, nobody on the ground knew what to do. Luckily, we had our firefighters there that knew how to operate around an A-10. So I mean, point proven right there on how valuable some of those things were. So we ended up being able to find a lot of those things and then massage all the details out of what our mission essential tasks were going to be. And that followed up the week after that. We had the next working group that was at Moody, and we refined those mission essential tasks, and we kept the ball rolling, right? I mean, this thing was very fluid. We had exercise after exercise, working groups, and all kind of merged in together. So it was a great opportunity that kind of led up to defining this thing a lot further.
Can you talk about any of the changes that were born out of, and I know we're kind of now bleeding into Moody and their role as a lead wing, but I guess so we talked about that December working group and whiteboarding, what changed from when you first wrote something on the whiteboard to, the next working group and so on and so forth, how much change or did it change?
Yeah, it changed dramatically. When that first working group in 2019 in San Antonio, when you look at that whiteboard, it was really the first time we put a scheme of maneuver on the board. But I think even then, we didn't realize where the Air Force wanted to go because that whiteboard scheme still had structural vehicles assigned to it and had tenders and it had, 50 to 70 people assigned to it. And we were pushing them out everywhere. And we ourselves, I mean, me, Mark, and everybody else, we were still in the old mentality. So then you fast forward and through iterations where Mark goes out with his team doing that, what was it called? Crazy Kitty Cat or whatever they call it. Some other his command is the worst at naming exercises, man.
Ready Tiger, ready
Tiger. There you go, Crazy Kitty Cat.
And it should have been called Crazy Kitty Cat.
I know, missed opportunity. And they're out there testing these things, and we've got our little notes, and we come back to this drawing board, and we're like, well, this is dumb. Scratch that off. This is a horrible idea, or this worked, and you're circling it. And we're starting to bring in more people, Matt. It's like you're aware. We brought you in, and you were part of this group, and we brought Jesse. I hijacked Jesse and brought him in, and now we're starting to build this team. And when you look at the size of the team, and I couldn't name everybody that was a part of this, right? Like, you're talking 80 plus people is probably not an understatement of how many people had a hand in shaping, building, moving this to what it is today. And every single one of our meetings, we continue to refine that product. We're still refining the product today.
Chief Abrahamson, you mentioned, or maybe it was Chief Wink, you mentioned structural engine still being a part of the contingent, a part of this whole scheme. At what point was that cut? I guess, was the P-19 Charlie introduced as in the initial stages of this? Or I guess what point were structural capabilities kind of cut out of it?
Yeah, so when we first started looking at what our footprint for AFFOGEN was going to be, we kind of had two different sizes, right? We had what is the smallest that we could possibly think of, and then what are we going to be placing at the mobs? Still bringing in the structure protection and tankers and so on. Um, as it evolved, I mean, we're looking at logistics, right? Like how much logistics can we bring forward, and what are we willing to save and sacrifice? So obviously there's a priority. Air crew and aircraft are our first one. So can we bring in that amount, and then what's left over? Well, if we're at these foreign places, how much is structure protection really needed? If we're operating for short term time periods, everything is temporary. Is it make much sense to bring a pumper over for some wooden facilities and tents, or is that something that we already have on site with a tanker and a crash truck can do? It's all water in the end. So those things just had to keep being refined as we went down, and of course the Air Force, as they changed from XAB to I don't even know what we're at now with the terminology of each of the packages, but it just had to be refined every single time.
And by being refined, the good part for us as we refine these is coming together early and building that mission essential task list. Everything we're doing is in changing was based off that mission essential task list. So what we told combatant commanders, we're going to provide you this. And that's where we shaped from the beginning, and it stayed true to that for the whole time.
And I bring up the P-19 Charlie assuming that it has a structural capability, but maybe this is bad on me for not knowing. And maybe I'm thinking, your classic P-19 Bravo structural panel stuff, but I haven't seen a P-19 Charlie in person, so I don't know that capability exists on it. But I guess I assumed because there's no structural capability in any of these packages that the P-19 Charlie kind of, takes over if we need that capability.
Or
But
it's not a mission central task we care about.
Or we don't care about it. That's a great point. And that there's organic capabilities in most locations that we go to that could provide that. So that makes sense. Cool. So we hit already a handful of how Moody and the lead wing played into this. So we came to the whiteboard. We thought of this idea. What does this look like for us? What are our mission essential tasks? And then go and exercise this in different exercises across the Air Force with Moody. Is there anything else, Chief Abrahamson, that you want to discuss on Moody's role in the development?
Well, doing these exercise right from the get-go, and Moody was the start of it. We learned a lot of things. And I always, at first I can't tell you how many times I said, well, I told you so, that I just got tired of saying it, and I wrote it on an index card and kept it in my wallet so I didn't have to repeat it anymore and just rather show it to everybody. But I mean, right from the beginning, we said, hey, fire doesn't need to be there. We have fire in place. You don't need to be there. Fire's not important. And we kept pushing the argument, and that's how we got to a lot of these locations for the exercise purposes with the forward operating sites and the contingency locations. Well, one of the key ones that I like to discuss when we talk about the development of this is during Ready Tiger, we had a team that was down in Homestead, which was the contingency location, and the team was relied on to provide everything. They were leaning on them for leadership, for how to set up everything, because we were the only engineers. I think there might have been a power pro or an electrician that was with our fire team. But there, out of 15, 20 people that were total down there, you had 3 or 4 CE members, and they were leaned on to do a lot of the, how do we do this? How do we do that? Because as you said, we're kind of a Swiss Army knife. So, and everybody sees us in that manner. Well, towards the end, there was a major medical emergency, and the members there said, well, let's just put the member on the aircraft and we'll take care of it when we land at the base. But but we had a tech sergeant that was down there, and he's like, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to make sure that this member is seen locally, and sure enough, we avoided a major medical emergency. The member would have had kidney failure up in the air, if they had not taken immediately to the ER. So having that in place, having that knowledge and experience from an emergency standpoint, really put us back on the table with Moody and ACC, and saying, okay, hey, all right, fire does have a lot of pieces into this, and so we used that to help us move forward and say, there are more things that we bring to it. When we're talking about leading teams and being on site, and what we can do for the protection of the air crew and the other members, and where we can assist on, so it was definitely clutch. And then the that prepared us for our dynamic force employment that we had several months later. And again, we were put to the table on what we can provide. And again, we had a team, a senior master sergeant that was out there leading everything, and we had air crew coming to the fire guys, trying to do air plans, whatever you call it. So they were leaned on. There was emergencies, real world emergencies going on. They were leaned on to take care of those. And the wing commander ended up saying, hey, fire's worth their weight in gold. And that's all we needed, and that really put the message forward that we are a major part of the teams that are going forward, not just to handle emergencies, but the leadership and the development of the team that's in place. So that really helped, being at Moody and being able to do that immediately from the get-go.
Yeah, so as these action plans are going up, right, and these after action reports and everything else go up through higher headquarters, through ACC, up to the half, they're starting out with, fire ain't getting on this plane, there's no need for them. And by the end of these exercises, it turns into combatant commanders saying, fire better be the first one I put on this plane, and I ain't leaving without them.
Yeah, it's a great example of, you can't convey everything in writing, right? Like you really have to go and do and see how things work. And you can't write in that fire is important because they're Swiss Army knives and we need them at every forward location. It's so I guess it's a great thing that it was exercised, and that it was realized through that exercise, that fire is incredibly valuable because they are Swiss Army knives, great leaders, problem solvers, and that's exactly what you need when you're in a logistically contested environment, right? Like where you don't have everything that you need, but you need to make things happen with what you do have. Firefighters, we don't just give up, right? Like that's not an option for us. And so I think you need people with that mindset in a contingency environment for sure. Anything else on, some of the working groups, Chief Winkelmann or Chief Abrahamson or Jesse, on any of the working groups, the development, nuts and bolts?
Yeah, so a lot of this there's a lot of behind the scenes that goes on. What I mean by behind the scenes is we can't, I'm just a chief, right? I don't wear eagles, I don't wear stars. I am an advisor, and I take policy forward for generals to approve. So when we developed all this moving forward, it still had to go through the wickets of the CE process, the higher headquarters process, because we're holistically changing how we do business as an Air Force, and that was very, very time consuming and took a lot of miles off a lot of people's lives. But the legwork done by Chief A and his team at Moody, and ACC understanding the value of firefighters, that then turned into the higher headquarters staff understanding the value of firefighters, made that a whole lot simpler. And we've had tons of work groups leading up after that to help shape it. And that's kind of where we had one down at Tyndall during a fire panel, and that's where I kind of roped Jesse into not only his position, but also this giant task as part of this three-headed monster with me, Mark, and now Jesse into his role moving forward.
Well, let's get into, I guess, some of the things that a lot of people want to hear about. Airfield damage repair, the Polaris dagger, and how that became a piece of this. And from what I understand, we probably could talk an entire hour on just the Polaris dagger alone. But let's get into some of that. Or actually, before we do that, Jesse, I kind of just want to give you an opportunity now that we've kind of transitioned into your involvement into this. What did it look like for you coming on board as the Force Development Manager?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Actually, before I was the Force Development Manager, I was the lead down at Tyndall Silver Flag, and I believe it was February of 22, February or March of 22 is when the fire panel was there in Panama City, Florida, and they held it down at the VFW, and I had caught wind of it, and we had class on the ground, and everything was kind of being handled, and so told the guys, hey, I'm going to go down to the fire panel, see what's going on, and I walked in and I realized I knew like 3/4 of the people in the room, including Chief Wink, that I hadn't seen since 2014 when we were stationed at Osan together. So it was really great, to see everyone, and that meeting was the very first time that Chief Wink kind of gave everyone his famous AFFOGEN briefing. And that was really, really eye-opening to me. And from there, he was like, hey, we're having a meeting, a working group at Moody in a couple weeks. Can you go? And I'm like, absolutely. So that's where I really came on board. And during that meeting at Moody, that's when we put pen to paper the mission essential task, the METs and the medals. And that's really what drove the foundational training. I was home station training at the time, but that's what drove our current foundational training. And it was just the whole beginning was really eye-opening to me, and definitely had to take the brain out and put it on the table as we developed these the training and everything moving forward. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's awesome perspective, and that's changed quite a bit too as the years have gone on, right? I mean, that's we have things levied upon us from the Air Force, but also as we're honing in what our mission essential tasks are.
Well, I think mission essential tasks have held true for the most part. I think we've refined training, we've refined equipment, we've refined employment. We've been able to build our documents, which was a great, again, back to these work groups who said we need to change policy, we need to change AFIs, we need to change this. And we were sitting there and we're like, well, why don't we just make it like a playbook to where I don't have to go through the entire process of changing everything through corporately. It can move at the speed of necessity and need and not at the speed of bureaucracy. And in building the ConAmp, that first one that came out, was really the first anything produced for any functional community on a way forward of how to do this. So it was a huge milestone for the Air Force. And I know you brought up Radar and RDR and ADR and all that stuff. So that was another conversation. We were sitting there at the higher headquarters, and at the time, Chief Cullison, who was a huge proponent of every engineer is an engineer, right? It doesn't matter if you're EM, you're fire, you're EOD, whoever, you need to be able to do engineering things. And I'm 100% on board with that. And we're sitting there chit-chatting, and I'm like, well, we could probably do this, I think. We're pretty smart. We're not horrible people. And I kind of went to Jesse on the side, and I said, hey, man, what'd you think about this crazy idea? And Jesse, in his normal Jesse way, was all for it, because you look at the writing on the wall, and when you see the totality of the picture that you're looking at and what people are going to need to do the jobs in front of them, it makes sense. And I'll just pass it on to Jesse.
Yeah, that was an interesting conversation. I remember you gave me a call after your discussions up there at the Pentagon, and hey, what do you think about firefighters doing Radar? And again, yeah, I was 100% on board, because I just came from Tyndall Silver Flag, driving around dump trucks and CTLs and dozers, having a good old time pretending to be a dirt boy. And I was like, if I can do it, we can definitely do it. Because firefighters are smart, and we are Swiss Army knives. So, yeah, you gave me my marching orders, put together a team, because we're going to send you to the 145th Guard. It was in New London. That's where it's New London, North Carolina. So they have a regional training site out there, and they do Raider training. So Matt, I mean, you were a part of the group, so you kind of know what went down. But it was a great trip up there. When we there was 11 firefighters that were part of this group, and we were all individually broken up into different AFSCs from the zeros through the sixes. And so everyone got their own perspective on what CE does as part of the Raider process. And funny story, so we go through this week of training in our individual crafts, and the cadre there thought it was a good idea, or thought it might be a good idea to do a competition between traditional craftsmen, the 3E0s through 3E6s, versus a fire-only team on the very last day. And in good spirit, us firefighters were like, hell yeah, let's do this. So the competition on the airfield, they split the airfield in half, and they put 2 craters on each side, gave us our equipment, and had a stopwatch, and said go. And we beat traditional craftsmen, I believe it was by like 8 minutes. And that was after a pretty crazy night too. So it's just a testament to the skills and the gusto that we have as a team. So over.
Yeah, that was a hell of an experience. But we had some absolute rock stars on that team. Shout out to Tech Sergeant Kolk over at Anderson Silver Flag, Sean Cantrell. Man, there was some great representation. And, at the feedback, well, of course, Chief Holly was there, retired Chief Master Sergeant Holly. And like, hey, how did it go? He was seeking all of our feedback. Is this something we could do? And each one of us was like, absolutely, yeah, we can do this. But we do have a collection of, the people in this room have a lot of experience, are in Silver Flag billets, right? These people who have been vectored into pretty good positions. Just, I think we said, keep that in mind, right? Like there's a whole lot of capability in this room, and I don't want to sound, I don't know how to not come across as arrogant, but anyways, we could absolutely do that. And yeah, that was a wild night the night before. I couldn't believe that we pulled that off. And some of the stuff like Kolk was doing with his excavator, and just, it's been like, some of the dirt boys were like, this guy, it's almost like he's been operating this equipment like he's been a dirt boy his entire career. It just, how quick we picked it up in so many facets, not just Kolk, but several others who just picked up operating equipment like, no problem at all. I think about the volumetric mixer and the guys with the water truck and stuff like that. You give us one day to teach us how to do that stuff, and like it's just amazing how fast firefighters can pick it up. And there weren't just high-ranking guys there either. There were we had a handful of airmen there. I think the lowest ranking was probably a couple of senior airmen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but. So there was good representation across, I guess, the ranks. But yeah, what an experience. Talking about airfield damage repair, and so the origin of the idea was are they worried about attrition of other engineers, and is that why we're brought into the fold, or we're not going to have as many engineers deployed forward, and so we want every engineer to understand how this works? Was that how this came about?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, when you think about it, during this time we sent Jesse and the team down there to do that, the Air Force holistically was looking at that first iteration of AFFOGEN, and I think General Brown at the time was like, you guys aren't getting it. You're still too heavy. You still have you're not light, lean, lethal. You need to go back to the drawing board and start again. So that feedback was coming back to us around the career field saying, okay, if there's not going to be that many people there, what do we need to do? Not only that, you couple that with the scheme of maneuver, and you say that that one runway is our lifeline. It is our way out, and it's our way to get help in, and it's way to project air power and all that stuff. If it's not operational, all the other stuff doesn't matter. That is the primary mission. That's your mission directive, is to keep that airfield operational. And when you look at our part, we're not just sitting there waiting for an emergency to happen anymore. We have to go forward and we have to be able to do other tasks that are mission critical on that installation. And RDR, ADR is one of them. And we just fell perfectly right into it. I'm also noticing another trend here that I just picked up is Matt, you seem to be part of all of our big things we do here with AFFOGEN and ACE. And another one we're going to talk about with my favorite topic and kind of one of the things I love is the FZ, formerly known as the FU, right?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I interviewed you, as we did a career field manager episode, and at the end, you put the offer out there, like, hey, if anybody, if you guys want to help with this, and I was like, hell yeah, I want to help with this. And there's a TDY to Creech, and we're gonna look at this Polaris Dagger that they have in Creech. I'm like, are you, I'm on board 100%. I would love to be a part of that. So yeah, I appreciate bringing me into the fold. But yeah, I have had my hand in a couple of things that I'm incredibly thankful for. But it's been really cool to see it. It's stuff that's kind of right up my alley. I just the contingency side of the house. I like it a lot. But yeah, let's talk about the Polaris Dagger, and I guess I'm really curious about the origin of that idea. As we're whiteboarding and bar napkin this whole thing, at what point were we like, let's get a utility vehicle with a fire pump on it and put that, into a forward sight?
Yeah, so you may not even know this part of it, but the first time we ever saw or even heard of or even thought about this product was actually in 2019 in San Antonio. So we were in San Antonio doing some stuff there, and I think somebody found a video of this and posted it up there, and we started to think in the beginning we're like, oh, there's no way we're going to use this. Like this, you're not going to be able to. This is dumb. It's not going to work. And as we move forward in the iterations at AFFOGEN and ACE, we started to look at we need to have something we can use at these CLs. Like we need to have a product that's going to be combat capable. And we started to think back on some items that we can use, and the riv's not going to work. It's too heavy. We can't do this, the other thing. And we came together, and I can't remember, Mark, do you know what the driving factor was for us to go to Creech?
Yeah, we had actually from that video we had reached out to Polaris and asked them if they had this thing in production, and they said it was not theirs, and kind of pointed us to Creech and said, hey, yeah, this is where this thing is located at. And we thought, hey, what a great opportunity within the own Air Force of going ahead and taking a look at it. And that's kind of where it all started from.
Yeah, so we took the crew, and it was me, Mark, Jesse, Matt, you were there, and we went, and a few others went to Creech, and we were able to link up with some individuals that let us look at a bunch of different models. We were looking at the smaller model the Air Force was using, which I can't remember the name of it. Mark, what was the name of the smaller one?
I think that one was the M Razor.
The M Razor. Yep, you're right. M Razor Security Forces does, and we were able to look at the weights they can hold and how they drive and everything else, and just really look at, okay, we have our mission central task, we know what we want to do, how can we find a piece of equipment that meets all of our needs? And I kind of packaged that all up nicely, and I threw it at Mark, and I said, hey man, go forth and make this happen. And he really has done a great job. But back to the origins of this stuff, it was quite honestly the night before, we were at Nellis that day, and we had done a tour of the apartment. Matt, you were there, and the next day we were going to Creech, and the three of us walked out that night and went to across the street to a restaurant bar, and we sat down and you know enjoyed a few mango cart adult beverages and some fried cheese that Jesse loves, and we're talking about this vehicle thing, and we're saying, man, you know what's going to happen? How many people do we, where do we put stuff? Wait. And we just started to we asked the waitress for napkins, and we asked the waitress for a pen, and we just started to draw it all out about how it was going to work. I'll turn it over to the other two and see if they want to pile on.
Yeah, it was fun because you had to start thinking outside the box, like and big tactical decisions that the Air Force is going to move. Like, how are they going to transport equipment, especially in PACAF when you're doing it over the water? You're talking about a C-130, and P-19C fills up an entire C-130. So, is the unit willing to send one in just for one piece of equipment, or are they going to leave that one behind and send in a bunch of things together? So we had to think of something that was smaller, and man, this thing just fit beautifully in a C-130 in two pallet spaces, and weight too. We had to think about uh, how much uh, how much weight we could have on there. You don't want to overload the cargo area. So I mean, this thing was perfect for us, and it was a good opportunity for us to sit down and kind of brainstorm all those type of things that you don't normally think of when you're looking at a vehicle.
Yeah, and we're still to this day talking about it. So the Creech trip was 2021, I believe, and here we are coming on 2025, and it's still in the development. It's really close to making it into the field. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, yeah. I think we've come a long way in the research and development of a piece of equipment like that. Because if you really think about it, from the very beginning, there was the Polaris Dagger that Creech had actually developed on their own, and that we used as an example to go forward. But then after that, there was nobody that produced it. So we had to kind of go out of our way to find a company that was willing to take on that kind of project. And fortunately, Ward Apparatus was like, hey, this sounds like a good project that we want to be involved in. What do you need from us to go forward? What is the platform that you're looking at? And with that, we came up with the Dagger because it can hold the weight of all the personnel, the water, the equipment, and all the add-ons of the ARF kit, to make it the FZ. And being able to produce that, and we had series of iterations on fine tuning pieces of this and that, and to make sure it serves as a legitimate firefighting vehicle that we'll use in contingency locations.
And to give you an idea, Matt, of this process, right? This isn't just an off-the-shelf thing we grab and we throw in a UTC. Jesse and the team down there at AFCAC built a UTC for this, and Mark was able to build it along the way, and we were able to come up with an idea, come up with a usable design, present that design to senior Air Force leaders, get them to buy off on it, get it palmed for, basically put into the system to be paid for, get a check cut to go buy some, and get it into production in less than 3 years. In the R&D world and Air Force and government purchasing, that's unheard of timeline. Like absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, really, what, 3, 4 years, and somebody's going to have their hands on it, being able to operate it. It's incredible. I wonder, and I don't know if this is really relevant or important, but why did Creech have it? And from my understanding, it was Wildland.
Yeah, that's correct. I think they bought it for their range, with all the surrounding area, the desert kind of vegetation around the base and stuff, and I think they bought it for that. It had great utilization in the trails, which we, as you know, tested it out. Made sure it could get up to the speed and handle the corners with the weight and all that stuff. And I think
Yeah,
that's
thanks,
like,
Mark.
yeah, yeah. That it does do 60. So no, but that's why they had it. They designed it and built it for that. And of course, we had to think about other things than wildland, such as tactical transports, like sling loading, and other contingency requirements. And that's what it is developed today. And as a matter of fact, the very first two that came off the production line were just delivered last week to Holloman Air Force Base.
That's awesome. I want to talk a little bit on was it a fight for relevancy in the scheme of maneuver? So if we had this piece, that means we're logistically light. We can send fewer firefighters. Does that put us? That kind of solidifies our role at a forward site. Was that a discussion point early on? Like we need something smaller than a P-19 Charlie.
Yeah, it was to a point, and it wasn't. It was more along the lines of looking at our mission central task and looking at what the Air Force wanted us to do, than trying to find a solution to meet that. When we, I, the roadblocks we met along the way were many, and I'll leave it at that. We had to get a lot of the stuff that we would get approved at a higher level, once we went to actually action it, they'd come back and they'd say, well, we didn't actually technically approve it. And we'd have to go through a process again and get another briefing and a vote from higher level officials. And it became increasingly frustrating. And I'll tell you, we didn't win every one of those battles. Like, nobody invites firefighters to a meeting, and Mark can attest to that, and so can Jesse. They talk to us afterwards and tell us, oh, what do you need? Well, we had to be like the Kool-Aid man and jump into meetings like, oh yeah, and bust your doors uninvited just to get at the table with a lot of this to ensure that fire and emergency service equities and the professionalism that we bring to the fight was there and realized before it was too late. And it's a testament and it's a credit to everybody, not only on this call, but that has ever been a part of our work group, that has ever, taken time to help us work through the Conamp or review it or go on these TDYs or go on these exercises and help refine what we have to do to their efforts have really led us to what we have today. And I, as an ex career field manager, I'm forever grateful to the force that was behind me as we push this forward.
Yeah, there's so much more to talk about with this. I think about the light equipment package. Think about the ensembles and the discussions that were had around what kind of ensemble the forward
Oh, I forgot about
firefighters are going to
that.
have. I mean, there's some great points, and like just being kind of having the privilege of being able to be in the room as those conversations were being had was awesome to see the evolution of it. I mean, we were talking about NASCAR jumpsuits at one point. Like, do you think we could just put everybody in NASCAR jumpsuits? I mean, that's what they do, on a NASCAR track, so that we don't have to bring heavy ensemble, and just the evolution of that was fun, and it was cool to watch, and nobody, there were no knee-jerk reactions. Everything was thoughtful, right? Everything was thought through, and again, just a incredible level of professionalism, an incredible group of people involved in figuring all these things out, and the work still continues today. But we are closer to, I think, an end state than we were, 2021.
100%. We're completely closer. And you bring up a great point. You were a testament to that is when you go into these rooms and you go into these meetings and you're sitting there and there's 5 or 6 active duty chief master sergeants sitting there and the Air Force fire chief and AFCEC. And we brought in a lot of senior airmen staffs and techs and masters, and it can be intimidating, but it was great to see that even though you were in that room, anybody would had the full right to bring a position forward or a thought process, and it was greeted. It wasn't turned down. Like, we never really told anybody, shut up, you're stupid. Well, maybe we did, but I probably did. But everybody had a voice in this. At the lowest levels to the highest levels, we were all firefighters trying to make a better product.
Yeah, it was honestly on the professional development side for me personally. It was like just listening to the conversations, I realized how much I didn't know. When I think about like Chief Wilson and you and Chief Abrahamson having a conversation when we were at Tyndall in last December, a year ago, and I'm just like, what in the world are they talking about right now? It's just so far above my understanding. I need to learn a lot more than what I know now because I can't even keep up with this conversation here. But yeah, so just talking about me personally and how I benefit from it, just that side of things, and you learn so much. And again, it was thoughtful. Everything was thoughtful. There was a whole lot of dialogue, and these decisions weren't made in a bubble. So I think that's an important point to drive home. And again, still continuing the work today, but closer now than we were before. Well, I think that hits every point that we decided to talk about today on this episode. But I'd like to give each one of you the opportunity to, I guess, bring up anything that you wanted to bring up that you didn't have the opportunity to, or just give us your closing thoughts.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll go forward. Just touching back on the last statement that you had. Everybody evolves and how much they learn as they go up through ranks and get involved with. And even myself, when I went to the contingency war planners course, that was mind blowing to see how all the pieces connect. From having the national defense strategy all the way down to sending forces into a location. So having that understanding and then being able to put things down on paper that even the lowest rank can understand was very important for us. And that's why we, established the ConAmp on paper. And, for those that are, looking to get smarter about how things are going, that's what they need to start with. That's what they need to read. It's pretty simple. It's not too many pages, but that will give them the introduction on what they need. And I'll close out by saying, I'm approaching retirement here in the next couple months, and after 26 years, I wouldn't give any of this back. It's been an awesome ride, and we have so many great people in the career field. I'm very confident that we're going to continue moving, in a constant forward and positive direction, and be the leaders throughout the Air Force as we have been ever since I came in. So I appreciate the work that I've done with each one of you on this project and throughout my career, and the people that I've had assignments with and deployments and so on. So thank you very much for having me on today's show.
Yep, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in now so I can leave Jesse for last. I want to pile on to what Mark said. I'm about to be retired, and I'm forever grateful for everyone that helped us get to where we are. Especially, Mark Abrahamson, Jesse Marshall, two pillars in our community that drove this to where it needed to be. I walk off into the sunset, if you will, knowing that we as a group left the career field better than we found it. With that, I continue to press read, learn, teach, right? We need to keep doing that. We have too many people out there that are cashing paychecks, but they need to start cashing reality checks and understand where we're going as a community and as an Air Force, and get on board. Start to get on board and move forward. I'm the old guy in the corner now that gets to say back in my day and gets to go block a line in the commissary and scream at some clouds. So that's what I look forward to. But hey, thanks for the opportunity, Matt. Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for continuing to keep this going and getting this readiness series online, which I know in every one of our meetings you were like, we need to get this readiness series online. We need to get it going. And you kind of touched on that as to the why in the last episode with Chief Wilson. So thanks for everything y'all do, and appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chief. And I think it's good that it's happening now because so much has played out. And so, if we did it 2 years ago, there was just so much change going on. I feel like we're more of a steady state now. But Jesse, sorry to interrupt you there, but you got any closing thoughts for us, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I have a tremendous amount of love and respect for Chief Wink and for Chief A. Just want to say thanks one last time for everything that you've done for me personally, professionally, the opportunities, just the growth that I've gone through over the last couple of years under you, Chief Wink, and all the mentorship from Chief A. So just want to say thank you, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity as always, and that's all I got. Thanks.
Well, yeah, again, thank you to each one of you taking the time on your weekend and taking the time to explain, the evolution of our concept of employment and everything that went into it. And I think that it's helpful to give people context and how we got to where we are today. Again, these decisions weren't made in a bubble. They're complicated. They're complex. There was a lot of negotiation with different stakeholders at the Pentagon, different places. You all did a tremendous amount, a heavy lift, a tremendous amount of work in getting us to where we are today. And so, I'm appreciative of that as a firefighter in the Air Force. But again, thank you for your time. You guys have a good one. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Firedog Podcast. You can find more episodes like this on our website, firedog.us, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on social media. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at the Firedog Podcast. That is the Fire DAWG Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow to stay updated on every new episode. We'd appreciate it if you'd share this podcast with your friends or coworkers, either on social media or within your firehouse. This is Matt Wilson with guest Chief Winkelmann, Chief Abrahamson, and Senior Marshall. Until next time, stay safe.